Parents who have disowned or genuinely stopped loving your child, what happened? I disowned my father. I don't believe that it nearly as difficult a decision as disowning a child, but it was tough. I grew up in an upper-middle-class perfect nuclear family. My parents were high school sweethearts. My dad was an operator at an oil refinery, my mom was an accountant turned stay-at-home mom. I am a middle child. I have a 3-year older brother and a 3-year younger brother. When my older brother was about 10, my dad's drinking got out of hand and became extremely physically abusive. A few years later, my mom divorced him after 23 years of marriage because she was afraid for our lives. My dad went off the deep end. Started doing drugs, stealing, etc. Was involved in a few hit and runs. My older brother, who had received the brunt of the physical abuse, was manipulated into a relationship with my dad for a few years. To a lesser extent, so was I. He seemed to take an interest in us for the first time since we were little, but in hindsight it was just more manipulation and gaslighting. Won't go into all of the details, but my brothers and I eventually got wind of just what kind of sketchy stuff he was involved in. My little brother and I, who both had aspirations to get into law enforcement, cut him out of our lives completely. My older brother took a while longer. He was a kid who always just wanted his dad to love him, and so he was wearing blinders. He did eventually see the light, and cut my dad out as well. A few years ago, my dad was living with his mom. My grandma had been manipulated by him for years, and they had a symbiotic codependent relationship. She was a prescription addict and he was an everything addict. My grandma had a reverse mortgage on her home. She was diagnosed with lung cancer and given 6 months to live, and moved into a nursing home. My dad kept squatting at her house, despite the bank coming to, rightfully, claim the home. Cops got involved, and he was arrested. My grandma slipped and fell 2 days after moving to the nursing home. She developed a brain bleed and died a few days later. My dad had a seizure his first night in jail and was brought to the hospital, where it was determined he had a burst brain aneurysm. The doctors theorized that the aneurysm was the result of his drug use, and when he was scuffling with the cops during the arrest, his increased blood pressure and/or jarring caused it to burst. He's now in a nursing home, and functioning at about a 6-year-old's level. He has some inkling that he's fucked up royally and it is all his fault, but he really doesn't understand the specifics. He can kind of communicate, and hold conversations, but they're bizarre and wander all over, and a lot of very strange words make their way in. I visit him a few times per year. I only do it because the person he became with addiction is dead. I believe that karma caught up to him, and he's earned his hell. I truly would not shed a tear if he dropped dead tomorrow. He's been dead to me for a decade. I do have some compassion for a sad, confused 58-year-old man who is alone in a depressing nursing home with no visitors. He knows he has kids, and a wife. He doesn't understand they're divorced, and sometimes he even knows he has grandkids he has never been allowed to meet. So he doesn't understand why nobody visits him. I've started occasional visits not because I have any interest in having a relationship with him, but because unfortunately the doctors saved him when his aneurysm burst, and we're left with a person who is paying for crimes he doesn't know he committed, in a world he doesn't understand. He sometimes cries when he asks to see pictures of that little boy, my nephew, his grandson, and I have to explain, yet again, why he isn't allowed to meet him. He asks me questions about that cop, my little brother, whose name he can't remember. He looks so proud when I tell him that his son is rising through the ranks and just became a K-9 officer. It's like a shard of the dad he was 25 years ago has surfaced, and everything in between only exists as a convoluted fever dream. It tears my heart open as a human to see his suffering, but in a really twisted, sick way gives me satisfaction that his actions caught up to him, which makes me hate myself even more than I already did. I doubt anyone has read this. It wasn't supposed to be a novel. But that's how I disowned my dad, then kind of developed a minimal relationship with the ghost of his former humanity that now occupies his body. My heart goes out to people who have had to disown a child. I was extremely fortunate to have an incredible mom and extended family to support my brothers and me, yet I am still damaged from my time with him. Having to choose between compassion and love for a flawed person and your own or your other loved one's physical and mental well-being rips something open inside of you and leaves you permanently scarred. I'm not a parent, I've never disowned a child. My parents disowned my oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. My oldest sister had a horrible relationship with my father, blames me for getting in the way of their relationship. She had her first baby, to spite him, when she was 16 years old. My father refused to give her money because she met a deadbeat child predator, and got pregnant again and again. She constantly put herself and deadbeat before kids. Dad would send money to girls for Christmas and birthdays and never heard a thing. He finally gave up. She's 30, has 6 daughters, and lives in a mobile home in North Carolina. We hadn't seen or heard from my sister until June of this year. My oldest niece contacted me asking to come to Florida, where I live, for the summer to get her and her sisters out of the trailer. I agree, contact sister, and she agrees. I set up plane tickets and organize the rooms they'll stay in. When they got here, they were completely disheveled. Clothes visibly dirty, smelled foul, so covered in lice that my white towels stained gray from removing them. My niece informed me that they had been without water and electricity for 6 months. They live in a 2-bedroom mobile home, there are holes in the roof, bugs and rats everywhere. As a family, we decide the girls aren't going back to North Carolina. We tell my sister to come to my parents' house in Florida to get her life together and get back on her feet. She refused because deadbeat is not invited. Ironically, she found out that deadbeat is cheating on her. She confronts him and he kicks her out of shithole trailer. Deadbeat said, "I would rather be homeless than live with you." Sister now works for the dollar store and doesn't pull her weight with kids. At least the girls are safe now. Edit, I never really finished my point with the story. My parents had disowned my oldest sister when she moved to North Carolina with deadbeat for 6 years until my niece reached out to me through Facebook. I had never even met my 2 youngest nieces until this event. I regret turning my back on my sister. I really hate her and what she put her babies through, but if we stayed in her life for those 6 years we maybe could have prevented this. Your oldest niece is a smart girl to contact you. You're a kind soul to agree and open your heart. I took custody of a 4 and 2-year-old the week my son was born because my sister was a heroin junkie. Much respect to you and your family. You're an amazing person for doing that, and your nieces, nephews are lucky to have you. I'm sure you've made a huge difference in their lives. Thanks for that, it's appreciated. I am blessed to have gone through a lot of terrible things in my life and come out with the attitude that I don't want other people to go through it, especially kids. It's a gift and a curse. I am in my 4th month of having temporary custody of 1 and 3-year-old family members. I have no children of my own and am often overwhelmed. I can't even imagine having a newborn baby at the same time. I salute you and yours and wish you all the best. Yeesh. I was also lucky enough to have a fantastic woman in my life that had already been a mother. I couldn't imagine not having her around to guide me through it all. I salute you for what you're doing. Takes an incredible person to change their life like that. I hope everything works out for your family. My siblings and I have stopped interacting with my oldest brother. We found out that years earlier he had molested at least 2 boys. He was an adult at the time. He showed no remorse, and turned the story around to say that those boys were at fault. It was so disgusting to watch someone you grew up with treat people so poorly and show such a blatant disregard for others. The good news is that the remaining 4 siblings have become closer and we now are able to appreciate the good we see in each other. It's true when they say that if you could pick your family it would look much different than it is. Not me, but my great-grandma. This story is really sad but also interesting, so I thought I'd share it. She was a young Creole teenager. French Creole was her first language, and she was a quarter to half black like me, with tan skin and loose brown curls. She was born in Florida, but when things started getting worse for black people in Florida, her family relocated to Texas. For those who don't know, Creole people tend to play heavily into colorism. Although they are definitely mixed race, they prioritize light-skinned people. The looser your curl, the lighter your skin, the more white you look, the better. Her parents had high expectations for her to marry a wealthy, light-skinned man who would take care of her. Instead, she met my great-grandfather. A poor, dark-skinned man jumping from job to job working for farmers and trying to make a living. The 2 of them fell in love. They were just teenagers. Her parents threatened to disown her if she continued seeing him, and like a rebellious teenager, she refused. They wanted her to do better. She wanted to be in love. They might have broken up eventually, if she didn't get pregnant. But she did, and that was the end of it. Her parents basically said, "You've ruined your life," and disowned her right there. The whole family disowned her. No one would speak to her aunts, uncles, cousins, not a single person stood up for her. So she had no choice. The two of them moved to California, so he could get a job picking oranges. He built a house. They had their first daughter. She was 16. She never saw her family again. Did they stay together? Until the day she died. But I think she was always a little bitter about being disowned by her family, and ended up being disappointed in the life she lived, which is tragic. I think she wanted more. A nicer house, a family to talk to. I know they loved each other, but she could be bitter and angry at life at times. She passed away 20 years ago. He's 95 now. Going strong, still fiercely independent, and living in the house he built for them. He has a younger, 73, girlfriend, but he said that he could never remarry. It would be an insult to everything they went through. So good he found happiness. I work in a doctor's office and it's so heartwarming to see older people find love after losing their partner. At that age it's about pledging yourself to take care of them through the worst, and I'm glad he has someone to take care of him.